Welcome into episode 257 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. Sources Say is, as always, brought to you by our good friends at Justice Dental. Visit one of their two Lexington locations. That's on Blazer Parkway and Wellington Way by scheduling an appointment online at justicedental.com or by calling 859-543 0700. You can even send a text message to one of their friendly team members at the same number to ask a question or make an appointment. Now is a great time to schedule your dental cleaning. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Justice, and their team strive to provide you with good oral health and a comfortable environment. The Justice Dental team looks forward to seeing you soon. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very happy to be joined less than 24 hours later after our last show, Sean. As we promised, we've been kind of waiting for the big drop here. And finally, we get not one, but two pretty significant news items for the Kentucky basketball offseason. One being, obviously, the big one. Hunter Dickinson announces his commitment to Kansas. Definitely not a surprise. Just reading the tea leaves, knowing their confidence leaving their visit and kind of what they conveyed to pretty much everybody out there, that they were pretty confident that they were going to land him. And then Lance Ware almost immediately afterward decides to put his name in the transfer portal. A little bit of a shock, I guess, more so timing wise. And we talked before yesterday about the lack of depth not being an issue on this team. And now there's a pretty significant question there at the 5 spot, Sean. So it's going to be kind of a breaking news, rapid reaction version of this show. So don't expect a super long, drawn out show. We just want to kind of get our live thoughts on two pretty substantial news items today.
Yeah, I talked yesterday that news would be coming, right? Like in each podcast that we do the rest of this month, I didn't know that it would be coming as quickly as it did. And then last night, you started getting a little bit of word out there that some of this stuff was going to happen. You now started communicating, saying, okay, we're going to do an episode tomorrow, but we didn't expect it to be this early. I was expecting more mid-afternoon into the evening, but no, it presents a lot of questions now for what Kentucky does. And I think it takes us back to what I felt like was probably going to be the most likely scenario when the spring started and we started talking about all this, is that Oscar Tshiebwe was probably going to end up being the primary target at the 5 spot. And now I think Kentucky shifts their attention to maintaining and building that relationship and getting a third year out of the unanimous All-American and a National Player of the Year. I think that's the direction Kentucky turns. But I guess the surprise to me is Lance. I think once we got so deep into the spring here that I thought that Lance was going to be a part of this roster. And yeah, you're right. Like right now, Kentucky's got 2 interior pieces and no depth. Like there's work to be done.
I asked about Lance, and word trickled out last night, and unfortunately we record at a certain time, and of course very shortly afterward is when the real more scuttlebutt, and then Hunter at 11:30 at night says that he's leaving Michigan officially, that he's going to make the announcement at some point today, and more Kansas talk after that. So it just obviously timing sucks and kind of dates our show pretty quickly. But there was nothing cosmic about Lance Ware's decision to transfer. Asking UK about it, was it just a playing time thing? And they said, yeah, I think he sees the writing on the wall. They're going all in on Hunter Dickinson. Didn't get him, but going all in on the return of Oscar Tshiebwe, continuing to reach out to new names in the portal at the 5 spot. And, he's kind of become the meme guy, the good vibes guy on the team, Sean. And that's great to have. And, to have a guy that is so accepting of his role, it's a great thing. And we've talked about the show several times. He has never let on any sign of discontent. That's like an amazing trait, because that's the ultimate locker room guy. You need those guys on your roster. And I appreciate the fact that he never, was vocal about his displeasure about a lack of minutes or whatever, or touches or whatever the case is. He just was fully acceptance of being the enforcer, that type of guy. But when push comes to shove, as Cal alluded to on his tweet to him, and I want to get your thoughts on that as well, because Cal kind of worded things very interestingly. But when push comes to shove, guys want opportunities. You only have an X number of years of eligibility. And yeah, it's great to be a good vibes guy, but it's also great to be a good vibes guy on a team where you're averaging 30 minutes a game and putting up 15 and 10 at Boston College, or, name a Northeast school. I think that's kind of where he would likely go. But at some point something's got to give, and it makes sense. I guess the only weird thing is just the timing of bringing in the Camden guys and having that connection of DJ being a freshman when he's a senior, the same way it unfolded in high school. DJ a freshman while he was a senior at Camden. It's, you know, that timing is weird, but you know what? You can't hold on to high school relationships forever. Like at some point, you got to do what's best for you. And Lance clearly thinks that that's the best option for him.
Well, with Lance, I actually thought that it would have made more sense for him to hit the portal earlier in his career than it does now. Like I thought that we had already kind of, 3 years in, probably established a role for Lance and what it was in this program. But if he wants to use that year of eligibility, and then he still has a COVID year of eligibility too, if I'm not mistaken. So then you've got 2 years there that you could use somewhere else to earn a more significant role. I'm just not sure where Lance goes, but Cal did add in his tweet that he knows he's welcome to return if he doesn't find the opportunity he's looking for. So we know that is still on the table there, according to Cal's words. But yeah, I was a little surprised with it. I think once we got to junior Lance Ware, I thought we would see senior Lance Ware at Kentucky. And I mean, it's not from a talent standpoint and minutes. I don't think it's like a significant hit. And I think everybody would agree with that. But when, with what Kentucky has right now, we were talking possibly 4 interior pieces yesterday, and now it remains to be seen what happens with Oscar Shibwe. And now Kentucky's down to Ugo and AB. So like it's a completely different scenario than what we were talking about yesterday.
Because this is a kind of tightened version of our show, I want to make sure we get our sponsor in here early, myperfectfranchise.net and Andy Ludicky, a franchise consulting company that helps others find franchises that will fit their needs, skill sets, investment requirements, and time commitment constraints. You might have seen Andy's name on KSR before, as he sponsors some of our recruiting coverage. He's super nice, great to chat with, and we're really excited to continue our partnership. Andy is an experienced entrepreneur and has been helping others go through the same process that changed his life 10 plus years ago. If you're wanting to find a way out of corporate America or a way to diversify, please reach out to Andy. He's got a ton of knowledge in this world, and best of all, his services are 100% free to you. Always nothing ventured, nothing gained. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at www.myperfectfranchise.net or email him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. Sean, going to the Hunter Dickinson commitment to Kansas, obviously Kansas is stacked. It's going to be a really impressive roster over there. It was a good fit for him personally, just knowing the way they operate and feed the bigs. There's a stat that it's almost identical to what Hunter got this past season at Michigan. Is exactly what David McCormick got 2 years ago. Very almost identical style of play, and just fits him very well. And with the NIL conversation, it makes so much sense for him to go. And obviously there was the talk about the facilities and things that he liked at Kansas that maybe Kentucky didn't offer, and things like that. What did you take of, I guess, all of the extra stuff that came alongside those conversations, specifically with NIL and the talk of, Kentucky, as we said on the show, Kentucky not offering any guarantees. That's not a game that Kentucky's willing to play, versus schools that are very openly comfortable making guarantees and throwing specific dollar amounts around. It's such a polarizing topic, Sean. Some fans think that that's the future of college basketball, and you gotta adapt with the times and do that. Others say, it's still illegal. Like that's pay for play at that point. It's such a back and forth topic. I want to get your thoughts on.
I think it's more damaging and dangerous to throw out a promise to a kid and then not be able to keep it, because then that is what can be turned on you and negatively recruited against you, right? Like at this point, Cal and Kentucky didn't throw out a guaranteed number, which means they were honest. And if that's they were straight up and didn't make promises, if that's what comes of this, then you can't really turn it into a negative against Kentucky when it comes to approaching other players, maybe. But I don't know. Like it is reaching a point where, you throw out pay for play, and a lot of it, we probably thought that term was thrown out the door and thrown out the window when NIL became a thing. But I mean, these players are certainly being shopped. They're checking their value at places. And I think visiting a place like Kentucky probably increases value for every single player, because if we know Kentucky's involved, your value as a basketball player, it's the same as visiting Duke or Carolina or Kansas. We know your value goes up when it comes to your availability in recruiting and also your possible earnings. So I don't think Kentucky took the wrong approach. Like, I just think that that's a dangerous line to go to. You start making promises and then that you don't live up to it, then you're getting hammered when it comes to trying to get other players, and that's where it can really be used against you. So, I don't know. Like, I thought it was a very complicated recruitment and situation. I thought there were a lot of things involved. It ended up being a big time show, right? Like multiple podcast episodes, and then a commitment video.
It ended up not even committing on the
Yeah.
Barstool Instagram. That's my favorite part out of all of this is they milked that so much for all the subscribers and stuff, and they didn't even get the scoop. Like Joe Tipton broke the news. It's amazing. Like on three, like just
and then a graphic.
Such an amazing finish to such a brutal listen. That 37 minutes of hell. It's just fascinating that they didn't even get the actual breaking news.
And then a graphic to announce that I'm making a decision. You know,
again through Joe Tipton. Shout out Hunter.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's great. Like, you know, but it's, I mean, look, he had fun with it, and it was a big decision for him. So,
did you see his video that he released? Did you see that it was a professionally done video, and it was also with Bill Self, like meeting Bill Self in person and telling him that he's committed
with an awkward high five.
Very awkward high five. Yeah. When do you think that was recorded? Like, when do you think that, like, how pre-planned was this? Because again, the reason why I said on the show so much yesterday, it's like they were almost like the way they were just arrogantly walking around and like telling people we're going to match whatever offers out there for Hunter. We don't care what the NIL number is. And the way it was, like, the exact quote was, they are mentally operating as if they've already gotten him. And none of the other schools involved, they were conveying that level of confidence. And, you know, part of it is just like recruiting through back channels. Like, I get that part, but it ended up kind of being right that they were confident. But was there a reason for that confidence? Was it because they had already recorded that video? I don't know. I thought the timing of that was very interesting.
Yeah. I'm assuming that video wasn't recorded at every place that he went, you know, just in case. Like, oh, let's get some footage here just in case I pick you. No, that video had been recorded prior to the podcast the other day, and definitely prior to 11 o'clock last night. So, like, that is, I don't know, like that. I mean, look, he turned into a big time story, right? We've been following it for what, 2 or 3 weeks now, the Hunter Dickinson recruitment and stuff. And I mean, when you're talking about NIL and things like this, is just more opportunity for him to kind of market himself. And he put a video together, and I mean, you're seeing it now on the screen. I want to see this awkward high five one more time, because I don't think Bill Self already knew what was happening, but he's like, all right, what do I do with my hand? And he holds up the glass in his hand and everything. Like, I mean, you know, wow.
What a disaster. So I want to get your honest, genuine feedback on the facility conversation. That was a purposeful, you know, several different people discussing that as a post-visit discussion. I brought it up on this show, and I think it's important on my end. But do you think it was something that, you know, Kentucky knew that it was going to miss him and wanted to kind of say, well, we're going to lose him anyway, we might as well turn this into a recruiting, like a positive recruiting spin where, well, their facilities are better and we need to politic our way to getting these facilities because of the kind of civil war with Mitch Barnhart about getting the facilities? I think it's brilliant, because me personally, I want Kentucky to get these practice facilities. I don't think Hunter Dickinson didn't choose Kentucky because of the facilities. Again, we said he's going to be here for 1 year. Who cares? A new facility wasn't going to be built by then anyway. But if you're going to lose out on the best transfer in college basketball, and you know that mom did not like the facilities, said that they were, quote, old and dated, might as well use it to your advantage and say, yeah, mom of the best recruit in the transfer portal says that our facilities suck. Maybe we should do something about that, Mitch. I personally think it was a brilliant move, and I support it.
I went to bed last night thinking that Cal shifted this thing to say, you know, let's bump up your NIL bag, and you talk about our facilities not being great. I don't know if that's true. But then again, I could see that.
What did we say from day one with all this when Hunter was first announced as a Kentucky target that Kentucky had reached out, the first text that I ever got was, I'm concerned that this is being used for leverage. And I came on the show and I said, Kentucky is moving forward cautiously, very cautious, understanding that there could be a catch with all of this. And there ended up being a catch with all of this. A lot of this was orchestrated. And I still, as of right now, I still just educated guess, knowing the different sides and where things stand with Oscar Tshiebwe and kind of their negotiations and trying to like battle with NIL and things like that with the people around him, things like that. Like, I feel like all of this was like an orchestrated, okay, well, if you're going to use us to drive up your NIL price, totally acceptable. We're going to use it to leverage into better facilities, and we're also going to use it into leverage to hopefully get Oscar Tshiebwe back. I think Kentucky handled this just fine.
Yeah, and then if you do get the announcement of some type of movement with a practice facility, then did Kentucky win this recruitment too? I mean, it didn't win it when it comes to on-court, play and things, but if that's the kind of the narrative that John Calipari wanted to push here, and maybe the angle he wanted to take this, then I mean, look, Mitch Barnhart can't really turn away from, number one player in the portal says our facilities are not up to par with Kansas, a blue blood program that has recently won a national championship and someone that we compete against in recruiting every single day, and the winningest program in college basketball history. So do you listen, or do you turn your cheek and not do anything about it? And I said yesterday that it didn't hurt Kentucky in the high school ranks when it came to facilities, but what if it starts to?
Jonathan Brantley asked a great question that I think a lot of fans have. I disagree with, but I do want to get your take on it. Why are you guys so thrilled to have Oscar back? Have you been watching the past 2 seasons? Yes, I did see him put up otherworldly numbers and become a National Player of the Year at the University of Kentucky, and also do the exact same. Putting up like 30 and 20 numbers in the NCAA tournament, basically putting the team on his back and trying to will them to victory. And I did see the last 2 years, but that's not to say he's not a flawed player, and that there would be deficiencies to cover up should he decide to return to Kentucky, Sean. I guess assuming Kentucky goes all in on Oscar and says, all right, man, you're going to make more here. Let's kiss and make up. It's time to get this over with. Describe that fit and how Kentucky can win in that regard and get back to year one Oscar when they were – a number 2 seed and in position playing as well as anybody in college basketball at times. How did they get back to that while maximizing his strengths and minimizing his weaknesses?
I'm telling you that the difference to me is Kentucky will have better guard play in year 3 with Oscar Tshiebwe than they did in year 1 and year 2. That's just plain and to the point. I'll stand by that. We're going to be sitting here in January and February. We're going to be talking about how much better Kentucky is at guard. I think that they have guys that are more equipped with long-term potential and upside to do things with the ball in their hands and more options to play through. Now, injuries and things hurt Kentucky's guard play the first year of Oscar Tshiebwe. And then we know that it played a role this year with Kaysen and things. And then Xavier not even playing down the stretch. So Oscar was kind of forced into being the go-to option, and that's not going to be the case with a third year. If we can find Oscar Tshiebwe versus Duke in 21-22 in that season, and that role of Oscar Tshiebwe where he's just a cleanup guy on the glass, that is where I think Kentucky finds the best version of itself with Oscar Tshiebwe another year on the roster. And you have some options on the interior with Bradshaw and Ugonna that I think that you have better, I don't want to say better depth, but maybe more talented depth on the interior with options that you can use and you can roll out there. And I think guys that can make an impact in their role. So I think the right answer is Oscar Tshiebwe back. I do. I would actually be concerned if Oscar Tshiebwe is not on this roster and Kentucky doesn't add anyone else. I think they have to add somebody, but I think getting Oscar back for another season to go with a better backcourt and people that can play with the ball in their hands and play through them. Oscar's not going to be option number 1 or 2 on this team, in my opinion.
I want to address an elephant in the room, something that we have not been able to fully dissect on this show, just because I didn't want to make it something bigger than it was. But now that Hunter is not coming to Kentucky, I do want to say there were really, really, really loud whispers the first EYBL stop 2 weekends ago that if Kentucky added Hunter Dickinson, that Aaron Bradshaw would be backing out of his commitment and going to USC with Bronny James. Like, that was a very real rumor that had legs, talking to people very, very connected to the situation, and that they were adamant that if Kentucky added Hunter from a play style perspective, knowing that he was going to be a high usage guy, going to be somebody that Cal would want to play through and minimize opportunities for him to succeed, that there was a lot of talk that Clutch was going to send Aaron Bradshaw to USC with Bronny James. Like, that was a very real rumor and something that I think everybody has been trying to just not blow up and blow out of proportion in hopes of, convincing and saying, no, we're going to get this figured out. So now that is off and they kind of changed talking to people even around Clutch, and the wording shifted to where it was like, okay, well, if Hunter comes, then Aaron's definitely gone. No chance that he's back. Like, it's a done deal. He's gone. And then they kind of changed the tune where it was like, well, if Hunter comes, he needs to be guaranteed minutes at the 4 and guaranteed X number of shots to come back, which is not Cal's forte, and just was not going to work. So that's why it was always so touchy to kind of bring up the dynamic of the roster and including Bradshaw with all these conversations, and how would Bradshaw and Hunter work together? Because when there's noise that loud about something is like, oh boy, that could really crush Kentucky's, ceiling of this team. Could you imagine the PR nightmare that would cause? But it was there. And now that Hunter is gone, and the difference with Oscar is, if Oscar comes back, it's going to be something to the effect of, we're not playing Oscar ball anymore. Like, you're going to come back to play around everybody else in the pieces that we have and that's something that Oscar has conveyed that he's totally accepting of, that he's very, very happy to move forward with. And I think Bradshaw is definitely more on board with that than the previous scenario. So I felt like it was time to at least bring up the possibility of that. And now that I definitely think it helps for sure.
And there's concerns, right? But Oscar's usage rate has to go down this year. Like, it can't be the number that it was. And even if Hunter Dickinson had been on this roster, his usage rate had to go down as well from what it was at Michigan. And I get the concerns about defense. I get what people are saying. Oscar is not good in the pick and roll. Oscar is 6'9". He's not affecting shots at the rim. But you have a sophomore there in Ugo, who we know didn't come back to Kentucky to not play. So we know there's going to be minutes there. We know that Bradshaw has length and some athleticism and can affect the game there as well. Like, those two are going to play minutes. I think this would be a version of Oscar Tshiebwe. Like you said, we're not playing Oscar ball. I don't think Oscar is going to be playing the number of minutes that he played the first 2 seasons at Kentucky, unless something just terribly goes wrong and one of those two guys isn't ready for the moment and they don't develop and they don't play as much. So I think that you could settle in on upper 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes of Oscar Tshiebwe, and then kind of maybe blend in some things defensively and play Ugo some more minutes to affect some shots at the rim. Like, Cal has options, but to me, getting Oscar back, a guy that can impact the game by not having to be the go-to guy, and he impacts it on the glass, offensively and defensively. You cannot take away how important that is for a roster that I think is going to be significantly better in the backcourt.
I know we wanted to keep this like right at 25 minutes, so we're going to get out of here pretty quickly. But last thoughts from you, Sean. What's next? What is next for Kentucky to complete this offseason? Obviously, it's definitely more up in the air now than it was 24 hours ago, and there's going to be a couple other pieces. You can't just take back Oscar Tshiebwe and say, all right, that's it. Have a nice day. Like, there's clearly a need for something else on this roster. What are you looking for from Cal to get this thing wrapped up? And with a season of such high expectations and a necessary step forward where you get out of that damn first weekend of the NCAA tournament, his biggest offseason as the coach of the University of Kentucky. What does Cal have to do to close this thing out?
Honestly, I think it's just roll with Oscar and Antonio Reeves. I really do. I don't even know. I mean, I think they're going to look at portal to see what's there. I mean, we still don't have the final call on Chris Livingston and that situation and things. But I mean, Lance leaving does open up a roster spot. Do they fill it? Do they not fill it? I don't know. I think we'll be able to tell in the coming days where Kentucky shifts its attention, right? Like if they pick up some intensity with some guys in the portal. But Jack, I keep seeing, a lot of comments talking about the lane being clogged and things like that with Oscar coming back. And yeah, that's the case. Like we know if Bradshaw's in there or if they decide to play Ugo and Oscar together, like that's not something that we want to see. But my whole belief of this was if they don't add a stretch 4, and I don't know, maybe I'm just wishful thinking here, but I would love to see a lineup combo that includes DJ Wagner, Rob Dillingham, Antonio Reeves, Justin Edwards, and then a big, just to see what it looks like. And I think if you don't, yes, and if you don't add someone else, it at least maybe entertains the idea a little bit more. And hopefully Toronto or the summer in Canada is where you look at it. Like that's where you look at it. It doesn't matter if you win or lose those games. That's what I want to see from Cal. It's not more so what we're seeing in May. I want to see what July looks like and if he does some things differently and actually experiments a little bit. Take advantage of that opportunity. You're not playing to win in July. You're playing in July to win in March, in April. So that would be my thing. I'm not if you get Oscar back, if you don't get Oscar back, they have to add someone. You can't go into next year with those 2 bigs only. You got to add someone else.
As MC says, fill it with Holland. Big fan of, and that was also the Bradshaw stuff was also part of the reason why I stressed so much in the various platforms about the need to at least you got to put feelers out to Ron. You got to at least make it clear that had something gone wrong with Bradshaw, that would have been a must get. And I think that there's a spot for him. And then there's some other questions about Josh Beverly says from that perspective, it seems like Bradshaw's camp would have an issue with UK adding someone like Grant Nelson. It was a style of play thing. It was basically Bradshaw knowing that if Hunter was coming, it was going to be a style of play that just did not fit him and would put him in position to be a top 3 or 5 draft pick. That's what Bradshaw wants. He wants to go somewhere that's going to put him in position to be the unicorn, step out, take jump shots, be a face-up guy, finesse, kind of utilize his skill set the best way. And Grant Nelson is, I'm not a huge fan. I get it. I also think he's leaning more NBA anyway, so I think it's kind of a moot point. But he plays that style of play where it's kind of the versatile face-up kind of unicorn style of play too. So it'd be kind of those two counter each other, I think, a little bit better where and I think Ron Holland's kind of the same way. Adding Ron Holland, he's not a ball dominant guy. He's a plug and play kind of guy. I think those type of concerns should be pretty cleared up at this point. I'm not saying it's like a done deal. Everything's good as gravy, but I feel much better saying that on this show today than I did 24 hours ago. And definitely much more than a week before. So,
yep.
But yeah, very, very, very big sigh of relief in some regards, stressful in others, because now it's on Cal to you got to get Oscar back. You got to figure that out, make it work. And if not, you got to find a home run, whether it's Ron Holland or somebody else in the portal. You got to close things out with a home run. And clock's ticking. We'll see how it all unfolds. Sean, let's get out of here. Where can fans find your work?
You can find my work at gobigbluecountry.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GBBCountry.
Find me on Twitter as well at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Reach out to me via email, jpilgrim@KentuckySportsRadio.com. With that, we'll be back next time for the Jam Packed Sources Say podcast. We will see you then.